IT Journal shares stories from entrepreneurs creating, managing, and driving the innovations that change our lives. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody. This is Howard Fox, the producer of the IT Journal podcast, your source for the latest innovations in technology. I'm very happy today to introduce you to Stephen Kroiss, the founder of 79 Ratio. Stephen, welcome to IT Journal podcast.
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate being here.
Excellent. So hopefully your work week is starting off well, and just really excited to kind of learn more about who you are, what 79 Ratio is all about, and how in your world technology is being used to not only disrupt hopefully in a good way, the work that you're doing with your clients. So maybe you could start to share a little bit more information about who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the IT managed service provider space for a number of years now, and I've worked for a couple different companies, and it's kind of given me a unique perspective on how they run in general. I found a lot of inefficiencies with a lot of them that I've worked at, and just ways of dealing with customers or dealing with employees that kind of drove me to start my own business. I saw what they were missing, and I knew what I wanted to bring to the table for clients and how to best serve them. So that's kind of what my focus was.
Okay, so when you talk about some of the inefficiencies, not only within the team, the company, for your clients, what are some examples of some of those inefficiencies, and then perhaps shift to how you've addressed those in the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. So one of the main things, at least for engineering standpoint, would be notes. Kind of just keeping tabs on what's going on with people's systems, or what's happening, or how to do something. There's nothing worse than trying to reinvent the wheel multiple times for the same issue. And so, go in and document everything properly and have it so that way the next time that someone calls up or has an issue with something, we know how to fix it. It's not, like, oh, wow, what is this? I've never heard of this before, and it's something that's happened 7 or 8 times, like we can just go in and get it fixed right away and make sure, everything's working. And if everything is documented well, then it means that you have a process that you can follow and, keep the time low so you're working efficiently, and, it's not expensive to work on an issue over and over again. And
So,
you can always automate eventually too if you figure that out.
sure. Now, when I think of resolving inefficiencies, an example that comes immediately to mind is I just have upgraded my notebook computer, new Dell computer. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but apologies to Dell in advance. We often have to call a help desk to get support, and sometimes those calls come. The person takes the call, and maybe you get transferred, and you find yourself repeating the same thing 3 or 4 times. Is that part of the inefficiency that a client would, or is that just one small example of an inefficiency?
That's one small example, but that's definitely a good one too. There's sometimes nothing worse than having to relay exactly what you've already relayed over the phone. So, and sometimes it's impossible to get around that. Like if you're talking to someone and you want to relay certain specific information or key points, but that's also something to train clients and customers about too. If you send an email in for something that's not critical or not a emergency situation, then you're going to have all those details in the email that they provide you, and so it makes it a lot easier on the client and the engineer as well. So it's just a matter of building the process for your team, and then also building what the desired hopeful outcome is from the client too, and what the expectation is too.
Do the clients have the patience to do this work up front? And I ask that because sometimes as a former IT guy myself, I remember going into projects and oftentimes we would either perhaps change the wheel that they were used to running on,
Mhm.
and we created this perhaps a new wheel, and we sometimes ran into a roadblock where this is the way we've always done things. And I'm
Mhm.
curious how, with yours and your team's work, how do you address the organization that says, well, this is the way we've always done it, and they kind of you know roll back on their feet just a little bit and are not willing to maybe change the way they do things? How do you address that?
Yeah, so it is definitely you know, culture shock sometimes when you're going into a new place and trying to work with them a specific way. Typically, for something like that, you'll start working their way for a little while, and you know, uh, throw in your way every once in a while too, just to kind of show them like, oh, hey, this does work. This, we can work more efficiently for you, and it's really a matter of teamwork for both you and the customer. It's not just one sided. There are some companies that they do not want to change, and I mean that's fine. They've got their own processes and stuff too. But if I can make my way more efficient, then and make it easier on them, then you know that's what I'm going to try to do. So
Sure. Now, when you go into the working with the new client, are there aspects of the engagement that really kind of get you going? I love doing this, or this is why I do what I do.
mhm.
Versus in my old world, there were things I loved being a consultant and a coach, but there were certain things I just didn't want to do or didn't
Mhm.
like to do. I had to do them because my supervisor manager said I had to. But
Yeah.
are there some things within this space that you really, this is what gets you excited?
Yeah, I think the big one for me anyway is when I'm onboarding a client. Typically, we'll go through and we've got a lot of key points that we want to hit on to make sure that we have all the documentation possible to be able to serve them best. And when we're going through it, they get surprised at some of the questions that we ask just because we need some details from them. And it's surprising in a good way. It's not just why do you need that? But they're kind of surprised at the level of service that we're willing to go and deliver to them compared to with anything else that they've had previously. So that really makes me excited because they immediately see the value in working with us. That we're really truly there to help them. It's not just hey, we're here to collect a paycheck or something like that. We do care. That's why we're doing what we do. So
I would love to, hear more about some of those stories about those client experiences. But before we do, can you elaborate more on who your ideal clients are, perhaps the size, the industry, the the makeup, so to speak? What's your sweet spot?
yeah, sure. So unlike a lot of IT companies, we have no problems working with one person all the way up to a couple hundred people. So small, medium-sized businesses, uh, and one of our kind of target audiences is nonprofits. We really like working with them. They have the same IT needs as everyone else. In fact, probably more because a lot of the equipment that they deal with is donated or hand-me-downs from other companies, and so they've got a lot of issues, and we're there as an IT company to fix them. So yeah, we really like working with them. It's a lot of fun seeing what they go through and how to make their life better and easier to work on, and ironing out a lot of the inefficiencies that they have too, so they can work better for whoever it is that they're serving.
I think I've worked with a couple of the IT companies, not the IT companies, the nonprofits that you were kind of alluding to, the hand-me-downs, and it's certainly a cultural change from their perspective because they're they're not used to working in technology in some respects, or how it can really add additional value, because they're always short on funds, looking for ways to save money or raise money, but they don't sometimes think that if we update our technology or how we manage it, well, this is actually going to help us do all those things. Are there some examples you could share, Stephen, of the clients that have come to you, and maybe you could share why did they come to you? I mean, they could have gone anywhere. They came to you. You had you sat down with them. They felt comfortable, but what was their pain, and then how did you help them overcome the issues they were facing?
Yeah, sure. So one of them, just a nonprofit that I was actually thinking of too here. One of them was a board member that he was a board member of that nonprofit, and he was doing all the IT for the company and or for the nonprofit, and he was sick of doing the IT and didn't want to do it anymore on his own time, and he wanted to get a company in there that's going to take care of them and make sure that everything's working properly. So uh, when I did sit down with the client and kind of go over what it is that we're offering and how we're going to do it, they were really excited and um, kind of shocked at the level of service we could provide them. So that was very nice and exciting to see someone interested in taking up that value proposition.
I think I work or volunteer at that nonprofit. It's a story I've heard quite a bit. And any other examples of the work that you've been doing? Now, we are in the Chicagoland area. I'm in downtown Chicago. You're out in the suburbs. Is there a limit that's in place due to geography, or can you can pretty much do anything anywhere?
Yeah, anything, anywhere. As long as the company has access to like a solid internet connection, we can support anywhere in the continental U.S., overseas, wherever. It doesn't matter. I mean, most IT help desk works remotely anyway, so you wouldn't even know the service difference from working at a desk in an office somewhere or whatever. But it also depends on what the client's looking for as well too. If they're looking for me to staff someone on site, then yeah, it's probably gonna be a little different than if I'm just providing help desk services or something like that.
Sure. Now, as you described this example with the individual came to you and said, "I just don't want to manage this technology anymore. I need help. I want to take this off my plate."
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine there's probably an aha moment when that individual was like total happiness when that occurred. Are there some other examples that you can provide, share, where you got the aha moment, or your associates got the aha moment, like, this is why we do what we do here? Anything you could share like that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm trying to think of a good one here for you. I know for me, it's been kind of, especially since I haven't been around super duper long on my own here, but kind of getting out there and having my employees be really happy at the job that they're doing. Uh, that was absolutely huge for me. I'm kind of got my head buried and moving forward and keeping things going here. But then when I take a second to step back and see like, oh hey, people are actually enjoying their job. They want to come to work every day. Like I said, I've worked for a couple of companies that the environment's not exactly great to be in, or it's very difficult to deal with other staff or upper management. And there's that phrase, you don't quit a job, you quit a manager. And unfortunately, that's been pretty relevant in my previous work history. And again, like I see my employees are excited to get up and go to work in the morning. They're not dreading it. They don't they're not late because they don't want to come in, kind of thing. So I think that was a big one for me. And it's like, okay, cool, I'm doing something right here. So just on my side anyway, it makes me really happy to see people excited to go into work.
That's fantastic. And as a coach, we should be enjoying our jobs as a place we enjoy being, not we have to do it. I'm curious, within the managed service space, are there disruptions coming down the pipe, whether it's a year away, 5, 10 years away? What's coming down the pipe that you see?
Yeah. So one thing that's pretty difficult, at least to kind of get ahead in some aspects, is compliance. That's always a big one because we don't know what's going to happen with that until it kind of comes out, and then you have to scramble to make sure that all of your clients are in compliance, or at least are interested in trying to be compliant. Because I know that's always a challenge too, is trying to get clients to recognize the negative effects of not following compliance rules and regulations. So that's always a big one, especially with all of that kind of going into effect now, and people are starting to get really targeted and hit with that. And then there's always like the viruses and malware and all that fun stuff too. That's always changing, so that's always difficult. But I do see a lot more automation getting in place to try to um, either take care of certain issues. You know, a lot of things are moving to the cloud too, so it's it. I don't know. It takes the load off of the localized plate, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everything in an office anymore. It's, you know, a lot of things are happening offsite, and you're just accessing them. So I see that definitely happening a lot more and more. So I
Great.
can't slow down.
You mentioned the nonprofit space, and that's your sweet spot. Are there any other industries, areas that you see evolving into, or is the nonprofit, is that where you see concentrating most of yours and your team's attention?
Uh, that's a lot of my attention. The other guys that I've working for me, like the sales staff, they do a lot with manufacturing, lawyers' offices, doctors' offices, architectural firms, anyone that's essentially got an office environment or like computers that need to be managed in general. So, I mean, they're pretty agnostic. They're pretty open to working with new clients. So.
Okay, so the as long as it's a small mid-sized business where there's an IT managed service need, 79 ratio is open to that, but it sounds then like the nonprofit space is more of your passion area.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, it's nice to see the effect that you have on it. When we go into a nonprofit, typically that hasn't had IT staff or IT really in any aspect, and you go in and clean up their environment, they work more efficiently, and about 9 times out of 10, you end up seeing them hire on additional employees because the workload ends up becoming higher because they're working a lot more efficiently. So you really see that growth that normal companies can afford to usually take care of to kind of get that built properly, but a lot of nonprofits can't. So that's always, I really appreciate that. And I think that's really neat to see personally anyway.
Well, I know from the experience with my local nonprofit that I work with that they would definitely benefit from an organization like 79 ratio. Sometimes when we talk about, what was your first job or what was your worst job, rather than going down that path, maybe perhaps going down what I would call a strength-based path.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to go back to some of your early managers, supervisors, and I mean, Stephen, you're the founder of a company that's small but very successful. You're growing. If you could go back to some of the folks you used to work for, reported to, what would you say to them now? What would you say?
Honest, I know what I'm doing. No. Oh, that's a good question. I think given my experience now, I'd kind of have a better idea. But just in, yeah, wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that one for a while.
Well, I'll tell you what, we can go back to the standby
Okay.
questions if you like. That's okay.
No,
And
great.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. And
No, that's fine.
um, what, while you're kind of thinking about that in the back of your head, even in the technology space, there's websites, there's journals. I mean, we even hope for the IT Journal podcast site to be a source for new innovative technology, what's going on in our world.
Mhm.
Where are the places you go to stay at the top of your game, whether it's a website, a podcast, maybe you've read a book, an article? Where do you go to stay at the top of your game, and even to help your staff stay at the top of their game?
Yeah, I pay attention to news articles, so I'm a big avid user of Google in many aspects, and since I can kind of see what I look up anyway, it gives me a really good news feed to kind of follow, and so I always kind of try to keep up with that and stay relevant with what's going on in the world, and then you know deal with different providers or resources that the company can utilize to be able to either offset or just work against or with whatever it is that's happening. So, if there's new malware out, then, I got to find a good solution to be able to combat that, so.
Mhm. Now, do you and your team, do you go to conferences where you're learning the latest and greatest, or some user conferences, or maybe industry conferences?
Actually, very rarely. I know conferences are typically where they're going to unveil a lot of things and stuff too, but most of those items don't come out right when the conference is. It's going to come out a little bit afterwards, and so you'll end up getting a lot of information anyway. So uh, it's kind of hard to justify sending someone halfway across the U.S. to a conference, or for something that's going to come out in a newsletter in a week or two. Um, I see resources being much better spent by just talking to the people that you're already dealing with. So current suppliers or current uh, I guess it would still be suppliers too, but of like different softwares or different packages and stuff too, just to kind of know what's going on. Just because there is so much movement in there. By the time you're done with that one conference, there's been 3 other conferences that have additional new things out there too. So um, I want to make sure to get a good broad spectrum, not just a very narrow focus. And from the conferences that I used to go to, working for other IT companies, it was all great and dandy for like a month or two, and then something else would come out, and it's like I said, it's really hard to justify the cost to go to some of these conferences. Just travel alone in the first place, and then you have such a narrow focus too. It's just it's not worth it
So,
personally.
so find a good source of information you can rely on, either whether it's the articles or conversations. When we do our podcast, one of the kind of activities we like to do towards the end of the podcast, we call it Insight to Go. Is there an insight that you would like to share with our listeners about the work you're doing? Maybe you heard a quote, you read a book, you read an article, like, wow, this is really good stuff. Anything that you'd like to share?
Uh, yeah. So this is going to sound kind of weird and kind of out there, but I've been paying a lot of attention to NASA and the different privatized companies that are getting ready to kind of make life multiplanetary. That really, I think, sets the stage for a lot of what it is that we're going to be seeing in the coming future here. There's going to be a lot of standards put in place. There's going to be a lot of um, different processes put in place too. So, like we're not going to be able to just ship materials out there willy nilly to wherever it is that we have people living. And it's going to be the same thing. IT support's still going to be there. It's still going to be a big thing too, but it's going to be hard to take a call when you have a delay of 6 to 8 minutes going to another planet, so you're going to have to iron those things out, and it's got to be consistent too. So, I'm just trying to think of things that we're all going to end up facing in the next 50, trying to be generous, years here, and just try to stay ahead of the game. It's all things that are going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Stay ahead of the game. I mean, that is kind of what one of the mantras of IT is. Not get caught by surprises. Be aware of the regulations, but to stay ahead of the game, to know how can we help the company do its work better, but also how can we help our pool of clients continue to do their work better? Because if 79 ratio is able to stay ahead of the game, you're going to be the go-to company for managed services. Stephen, I truly appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today in IT Journal. if individuals or organizations want to learn more about you and your work, what's the best way to get to know you?
Yeah, sure. So we're on all the social media platforms, but probably the best way that you can access all of those would be our website, 79ratio.com. And that's the number 79 and then ratio.com.
I appreciate that. It dawned on me, there was one more question. How did you get the name 79 ratio? Where'd that
Sure.
come
So,
from?
I'm kind of a math nerd. So 79 is the atomic number for gold. And so golden ratio, and that also describes the symbol that we have for our logo. So it's a cog shell spiral on there, and it's in color gold. So.
Excellent. Well, I have no doubt that 79 ratio is going to have a line on where that gold is, and I hope you can and your team continue to mine that gold. So, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the IT Journal. And folks, there you have it, Stephen Kroiss, founder of 79 Ratio. So if you are in need of a managed services for your IT infrastructure, these are the guys you want to visit. For the IT Journal podcast, this is Howard Fox. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out and have a phenomenal day.
IT Journal is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, itjournalpodcast.com.